Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Thank you, Ohio Satsang Group. Namaskaram from Michigan Satsang Group. First, we have a reading from Swami Paramatmananda Puri biography on the Road to Freedom, a Pilgrimage in India, Volume 1, by Akshaya V. This is followed by a song, Rama 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 Sita Ramana Papaharana, a Saint Tyagaraja Divya Nama Kirtanai by Kalpana. Finally, a reading from Ramana Smriti. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya.
On the Road to Personal Freedom, a Pilgrimage in India by Swami Paramatmananda, Volume 1, page 5. Upon returning from my trip to Europe, my elder brother Earl invited me to visit him in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where he was studying for his Master of Arts degree. Making the journey from Chicago by car, I arrived around supper time. I was surprised to find that my brother had become a vegetarian. He was noticeably trimmer, healthier, and calmer than when I had last seen him. I asked him what he had changed in his eating habits. 6 months ago, I began learning and practicing Hatha Yoga. I found a teacher here in Ann Arbor who spent several years in India, studying yoga under a master. She is quite an unusual person. I want you to meet her. She explained to me that food has a dual nature, subtle and gross. The gross part makes up the body, and the subtle essence affects the nature of the mind. The subtle components of vegetarian food are better for health and gradually give a more gentle bent to the mind, which in turn makes it easier to meditate. Through meditation, one can experience the bliss of self-realization, a bliss compared to which worldly pleasure is insipid. To know through direct intuitive experience that one is not the physical body or the restless mind, but rather an imperishable mass of pure existence and bliss, is self-realization, or the knowledge of one's true nature. There have been many who have achieved this state, and they have told that the real goal of human existence lies in that experience. We can go see her tomorrow. India, yoga, meditation. A flicker of light flashed in my until then dead heart. I was eager and at the same time frightened at the prospect of meeting a quote-unquote yogini. I expected that she would be something out of the fourth dimension. In the morning, my brother took me to his yoga teacher's house. What a surprise! She was a human being after all. Barbara was a middle-aged woman, lively, sweet, and natural. I felt relieved. I had expected to see a grave figure levitating 4 feet off the ground while standing on her head. We became friends immediately. She gave me a copy of the Bhagavad Gita, a well-known work on yoga, and asked me to read it. After eating lunch with her and talking about some ordinary matters, we returned to Earl's house. A brief meeting, but perhaps the most momentous one in my life. Little did I realize at the time that the seed of spirituality had been sown and would soon sprout and grow into the spreading tree of deep inner peace. In the evening, I took up the copy of the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita is perhaps the most revered of all Hindu scriptures and contains the essence of all of them. It is part of a much larger work, the Mahabharata, and contains the philosophy of the science of self-knowledge as taught by Sri Krishna, an incarnation of God, to his devotee Arjuna, while on the battlefield. It has been widely acclaimed by many of the most renowned scholars in the world as containing the highest wisdom attainable by man. I could not even pronounce the title, but hoping for the best, I commenced reading. As I read every word, I felt a thrill go through my heart. I felt as if I were Arjuna, and Sri Krishna was talking directly to me. All the questions which had been weighing on my mind were being answered, and even questions which had not formed themselves became clear, and doubts dispelled. Until reading the Bhagavad Gita, I never knew what the word wisdom meant. The nature of the mind and the goal of life were revealed in unambiguous language. Obviously, or so it seemed to me, the purpose of life was not to seek and enjoy sensual pleasures endlessly until death. Rather, it was to understand the mind clearly, purify it, and go beyond it to experience reality, where quiet bliss alone reigns supreme. For the first time since I was a little boy, I cried. Those tears were not born out of sorrow or selfishness, but out of joy. I did not sleep that night. My thirst was so great to complete the book. Now and then my brother came in to see what was the matter. What could I answer? I had entered another world, as it were, that night. One of the main interests of my life became the attainment of self-realization. But to be perfectly honest, even more than that was the desire to live with a woman. This is quite a natural desire for any teenage American boy, but living at home with my mother had made it difficult, if not impossible. This undoubtedly was one of the main reasons for leaving Chicago and going to California, which was at that time the haven for people such as myself. After I settled down in the new house, my thoughts centered around the achievement of my immediate goal. Being somewhat reserved by nature, I decided that if I were to go get a suitable companion, it would have to be the same way that I had found the present house, that is, by providence. So I made no efforts to find a girlfriend. Strange as it may seem, the very next day a girl appeared at my door. She was looking for me. She had heard of me in Chicago and had come to California searching for me. Whether she was telling the truth or not, I did not know, nor did I care to know, as my wish was resolved of its own accord. The impact of this experience in my mind was such that I began to earnestly believe that whatever was really necessary for me would be provided. In fact, up to the present, I had experienced the truth of this countless times. Of course, what is needed will naturally differ according to time and place and may be painful as well as pleasant. However, if one is patient and keeps his goal as the realization of God, one will find circumstances forming themselves for one's own spiritual progress. At that time, a girlfriend was what I needed. Later, the company of sages was essential. Still later, sickness and suffering became necessary. In fact, whatever is happening at the present moment is for the best in the eyes of spiritual aspirants, and is being provided at the right time in a most mysterious way by a most gracious being. After Earl arrived, he gave me a new book to read. It was the life and teachings of the great sage of India, Sri Ramana Maharshi. Ramana, when a boy of 16, was suddenly overcome with fear of death. There was nothing wrong with his health, nor was there any reason that such a fear should arise at that time. Still, he felt that he would die and that he must solve the problem then and there. He lay down and simulated death. Then he thought to himself, now the body is dead, but I still feel this sense of I shining within. I am therefore the deathless spirit and not the inert body. This did not come to him as a logical conclusion, but rather as a flash of intuition and direct experience. This was not a mere glimpse of reality to be covered over soon after by the darkness of ignorance. From that moment, the awareness of himself as pure spirit, beyond death, remained intact until his departure from the body. Some 50 years later, in 1950. Just before his death, Ramana assured his devotees that he would continue to be with them and guide them in spite of the death of the physical body. Having attained self-realization through a spontaneous act of inwardly inquiring, who am I? Eliminating the body and mind as his real being, and clearly experiencing himself to be pure awareness transcending all, he became free of all desire and fear, even the fear of death, and remained established in perfect peace. Ramana lived near a holy mountain, Arunachala, in the southern part of India, radiating spiritual light and peace. He became a living example as the ideal of self-realized sage in daily life. As the means to attaining that state, he advocated either the continuous guidance of and surrender to an enlightened being, or independently pursuing the path of self-inquiry. By adopting either approach, one will acquire the necessary serenity and concentration to experience the truth within. His teaching and life had a great appeal for me, and I decided to practice both methods. Self-inquiry took the form of sitting quietly repeating I, I, I to myself while trying to fix my attention on the meaning of the words, the thing within me which shines as I. In my day-to-day life, I tried to practice surrender to Ramana, whom I took as my master, by accepting the circumstances in which I found myself without reacting either positively to the pleasant or negatively to the painful. My brother taught me some Hatha Yoga postures for improving my health and purifying my nervous system. All this helped give me discipline to my otherwise loose life. At the time, I thought I would get married and lead a mixture of spiritual and worldly life, or a spiritualized worldly life. However, it was to be otherwise. One day, a letter came from Earl from Barbara, his yoga teacher in Michigan. It said, "I'm very glad to hear that Neil is practicing the postures as taught by you. He is still very young. Why doesn't he become a monk and dedicate himself completely to the attainment of the self?" He showed me the letter. After reading it, I felt like a person who was suddenly given a bitter herb while eating sweet pudding. I was quite happy with my girlfriend and my meditation practice, and had no intention of giving up either. I dismissed the matter from my mind and went about my usual routine. A few days later, while meditating, my concentration suddenly became intense, and my dispersed mind resolved itself into a single point. The mind, like a small light, became extinguished, at which moment infinite light, perfect bliss, and an all-pervading oneness alone remained. All trace of individuality and objectivity was lost. The experience was indescribable. Then, like a descending elevator, my mind came back into existence and became aware of the body and the world. But the next moment again merged into that light. This repeated itself 3 or 4 times, after which I was weeping and sobbing like a small boy at the thought of that tremendous peace and vastness. The revelation that I was once again able to merge into that supreme light forever, after undergoing many painful lessons in life, appeared as a certainty from within. I felt that Ramana was in some inexplicable way responsible for this sublime experience, for had I not mentally surrendered my life to him? He had assured his devotees that he would be with them even after the death of his body, and so he must surely be with me as well. However, I was under a grand illusion that having had such a spiritual experience after only a few days of meditation meant that if I continued to meditate, I would gain the same experience again and again until it became permanent, all within a few weeks at the most. Needless to say, this was not the case, although the memory, as well as the taste of that bliss, has remained with me ever after. Somehow a glimpse of that goal was vouchsafed, and now it was for me to walk the steep path leading to it.
Rama 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 Sita Ramana Papa Harana Rama 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 Sita Ramana Papa Harana Chantaraka Yundute Vari Chalimo Nidu Kalimo Chantaraka Yundute Vari Chalimo Nidu Kalimo Rama 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 Sita Ramana Papa Harana Rama 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 Sita Ramana Papa Harana Manameche Manuchu Inta Madama Kamadama Manameche Manuchu Inta Madama Kamadama Rama 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 Sita Ramana Papaharana Rama 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 Sita Ramana Papaharana Nanu vinagatiyavaranu naguvo leka biguvo Nanu vinagatiyavaranu naguvo leka biguvo Rama 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 Sita Ramana Papaharana Rama 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 Sita Ramana Papaharana Karunaju nanuchu paluko Karava Brova Baruva Karunaju nanuchu paluko Karava Brova Baruva Rama 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 Sita Ramana Papaharana Rama 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 Sita Ramana Papaharana Ilarakshana Seyaleni Kulama Vyakulama Ilarakshana Seyaleni Kulama Vyakulama Rama 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 Sita Ramana Papaharana Rama 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 Sita Ramana Papaharana Ramayani Mora Lidamatiraya Devaraya Ramayani Mora Lidamatiraya Devaraya Rama 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 Sita Ramana Papaharana Rama 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 Sita Ramana Papaharana Inni Vinnapamu Lagumadi Inuma Mata Vinuma Inni Vinnapamu Lagumadi Inuma Mata Vinuma Rama 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 Sita Ramana Papaharana Rama 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 Sita Ramana Papaharana Shashi Mukana Nejedi Yashamanadu Vashama Shashi Mukanan Nejedi Yashamanadu Vashama Rama 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 Sita Ramana Papaharana Rama 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 Sita Ramana Papaharana Parli Parli Dana Karma Menta Valamo Voleka Chalamo Parli Parli Dana Karma Menta Valamo Voleka Chalamo Rama 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 Sita Ramana Papaharana Rama Rama రామ సీతా రమణ పాపహరణ వలచి పాడి ఇంత పల్కవలెన తాళకలన వలచి పాడి ఇంత పల్కవలెన తాళకలన రామ 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 సీతా రమణ పాపహరణ రామ 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 సీతా రమణ పాపహరణ లేమిదల్ప పెద్దలేవరు లేరోవో నీదు పోరో లేమిదల్ప పెద్దలేవరు లేరోవో నీదు పోరో రామ 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 సీతా రమణ పాపహరణ రామ 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 సీతా రమణ పాపహరణ ಉಂಡಿನನು ನಿನ್ನು ಬೋಲಿ ಯೊಂದುರೇ ಆಡುಕೊಂದುರೇ ಉಂಡಿನನು ನಿನ್ನು ಬೋಲಿಯೊಂದುರೇ ಆಡುಕೊಂದುರೇ ರಾಮ 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 ಸೀತಾ ರಮಣ ಪಾಪಹರಣ ರಾಮ 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 ಸೀತಾ ರಮಣ ಪಾಪಹರಣ ವಶಮುಕಾದು ತ್ಯಾಗರಾಜ ವರದ ಕುಂದ ಸುರದ ವಶಮುಗಾದು ತ್ಯಾಗರಾಜ ವರದ ಕುಂದ ಸುರದ ರಾಮ 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 ಸೀತಾ ರಮಣ ಪಾಪಹರಣ ರಾಮ 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 ಸೀತಾ ರಮಣ ಪಾಪಹರಣ ರಮಣ ಪಾಪಹರಣ ರಮಣ ಪಾಪಹರಣ.
Tales of Bhagavan by various devotees from Ramana Smriti. This happened about 2 years before Bhagavan's Mahanirvana. One morning, Bhagavan was in the hall, surrounded by devotees from many lands. It was time for lunch and everybody was hungry. Some were already in the dining hall, waiting for Bhagavan to come. At that time, Bhagavan was suffering from severe rheumatism in his knees, which were swollen and gave him severe pain. To get up, he had to rub them first to remove the stiffness, and it would take some time. At last, he got up slowly from the sofa and leaning on his walking stick, he was about to go through the doorway when he noticed a village milkman wrapped in a cotton shawl with a mud pot hanging on a strap from his shoulder. Bhagavan stopped, looked at him and exclaimed, "Look, is it not Chinnapayya?" "Yes, it is me, Swami," the villager replied with devotion and respect. Bhagavan asked him, "How are you? Are you well? Have you come to see me? You have done very well. But what is in your pot? Have you brought some gruel?" "Yes, Swami, I have brought some gruel," replied the milkman shyly. "Then come on, let me have it." Bhagavan put away his stick, cupped his hands together, and bent forward, holding his hands near his lips. The milkman started pouring the porridge from his pot in a thin stream into Bhagavan's hands as he sipped it with his chin between his wrists. The poor man's face was beaming with joy, and Bhagavan was drinking steadily as if the grey porridge was nectar to him. The dining hall was full of hungry and somewhat angry people. One of them came out to see what could be the cause of the delay in Bhagavan's coming. And when he saw what kind of lunch Bhagavan was taking, he exclaimed, "How unfair, Swami! We are all waiting for you and you are late for the sake of the peasant?" Bhagavan grew indignant. "What? Do you all think that I am here for your sakes only? Do I belong to you? Did you care for me when I was on the hill? Nobody wanted me then. Only the shepherds who would share their kuru with me." And he went into the dining hall, followed by the milkman and his pot. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya.